So thank you, David, for the introduction and for doing all of this. And thank you, Jane, for organizing this, and everyone at the Nest, and everyone that came that showed up today. So my first piece that, well, I'll introduce myself. I've lived in Fairfield County for about 7 years. I'm originally from New Jersey. And I've been making art for a long time. But I'm going to be talking about my 10 by 10 very briefly, and just say that it is an extension of a series that I will be sharing with you on my larger wall space. And I'll be talking about sort of the confines that I built for myself to create the series, the medium that I used, as well as sort of the meaning behind the work, and my process. So these three pieces, which, as I mentioned, are sort of part of the same series as the 10 by 10, but part of a larger series. There's about 30 of these, and these are just a few that I pulled to just to show you what I was thinking when I was making these pieces. Anyway, when I started this body of work, I wanted to challenge myself and work within certain confines. So my confines were that I could only use this type of paper, and I had to use the primary colors pretty much. I could use a grayscale, so black to white and anything in between. And like I said, the primary colors. I teach really little kids. I'm an art teacher to elementary age students, so I think I just have a love for the primary colors that I think comes from teaching kids that small. So I'm really inspired by their work, which I think maybe you can see by some of my line work. But yeah, so in terms of my process, well, I'll just say my work is all about the process. I don't start a piece knowing what's going to happen. That's the fun for me. That's sort of, I have a lot of fun just making the work, and it's sort of a mystery to me what's going to happen. So I'll start by just making a mark or putting a piece of paper on top of another piece of paper, and then I'll see where it goes from there. So some people say it would call that an intuitive process. So another thing that I like to play around with is I like to juxtapose sort of lowbrow materials with highbrow materials. So what I mean by that is I like to include things like binder clips and masking tape in my work. And I think it's sort of a little confusing sometimes, but then I'll juxtapose that with this sort of like really nice handmade pastels. And I think that that kind of creates a conversation and a little bit of tension in the work, and just a conversation of, what is a quality material and what isn't a quality material, and what does that mean for my artwork. So yeah, in terms of the meaning of the pieces, again, a lot of it is purely about the process of making the work, and that's sort of the meaning for me, is process in general. But I tend to journal about my work when I'm done with it, and these are really recent pieces, so I'm still sort of journaling through it and figuring it out. Yeah, so I guess I'll take some questions if anyone has them at this point.
Lauren, do these go together as a set, or as a series, or just three random pieces from a very much larger series?
So these are three pieces from a very, so I do work sort of in large quantities. So these are three from probably a series of somewhere between 20 and 30. And I just chose them because I thought that they were sort of an example of a variety of what I do with the primary colors as well as the grayscale. And then I mentioned tape, like this is tape, right? This is pastel. This is sort of me playing around with what happens when you rip sort of a ply of the paper and then rub charcoal on it. I'll also just mention that my process is super messy, so I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I have all these pieces and then I have my scrap pile of just stuff that I'm ripping apart, and for me that's part of the fun, the process, making a mess. Yeah. I clean it up at some point, but so.
that stunts your creativity.
Cleaning up? I know, it does. It does. So that's why I wait until they're done. Yes.
So like, oh God, I got
Yes,
company.
exactly.
You mentioned the juxtaposition of the quality materials and non-quality materials.
Yeah.
Do you worry about the longevity of your pieces, given
I'm so
those?
glad you asked that question. That's part of it for me. So my piece in Silvermine, which was part of a larger series called The Shift and Fade, it's not part of this series, but I was playing with that idea of ephemerality of work. So the piece in that series is on newsprint, which is, as you know, you leave a newspaper out, it starts to sort of crumble after a while. And that was part of it for me, was it was an accident. I made these pieces that I loved, but I made them on newsprint because they were supposed to be practice pieces. And then I went through this I freaked out. And I was like, what do I do? And I was trying to stop the aging process. And it was just totally interesting because I thought, well, it's actually kind of great because every time I hang these pieces, every time I show them, they start to look a little bit different. And we can't really stop the aging process of anything. And so I do like to speak to that in my work.
There's torn edges in your work. How does that work for you, and what is that?
Yeah. So the torn edges in my work, I really enjoy the aesthetics of that. I think that when I'm using a paper like this, that's sort of, it has that rougher texture to it. I like the grayscale that it creates. I like to play around with different types of gray and black and sort of the push and pull of those colors. Yeah. Yeah.
What might your next series be in terms of the limitations you're going to impose on yourself?
I'm still thinking through that, but I think I'm going to give myself smaller confines. I like the idea of being creative within like a little box. It's a challenge, yeah.
So I'm just curious about you have several layers in these two pieces, correct? So that's clearly not part of your parameters. You can have many layers, and you can tear, and so there's quite a few things that you can do.
There's a lot that you can do in parameters. Yeah, absolutely.
And are these like extremes of these two in terms of?
Mm-hmm. So absolutely. So this one all the way over here. It is somewhat of an extreme because I use the three sort of colors that I have allowed myself to use, the primaries. And absolutely, I have layered them up. Whereas this one, aesthetically, is much more simple because there's no other layers of paper. I was just sort of playing with depth that you can get with utilizing red, white, and black together. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.